Hello, everyone. Thank you for gathering and joining us for this session on cybercrime, plan your digital defence. So we've seen in the last 18 months, couple of years or so, AM100 dealer groups have been increasingly targeted by cybercriminals looking to hold businesses to ransom. Eddie Hawthorne has joined us as Chief Executive of Arnold Clark, and he's going to share his experience of his business being attacked at the end of 2022 and what a ruined Christmas he unfortunately had as a result of that, and how the company has worked to recover and prepare its defences for the future. And also joining us is Mark Rodbert, Chief Executive of Idax Software, who'll be sharing his perspective on the things that companies can do to protect themselves and review their own internal processes and systems to make sure they aren't caught out. So, to start with, Eddie, you've got quite a story to tell, really, of what happened on, I believe, December the 23rd last year and the kind of fallout from that. So, would you share your perspective on what it was like to run a major business that became a victim to cyber criminals?
Thanks, Tim. I do like to relive that horror every day, and I'm reliving that horror every day. But just to give you a little bit of perspective, one of the reasons that I agreed to come along, and Mark's here as well, is that this is all about raising awareness. This is about raising awareness and how these criminals actually are affecting society, they're affecting business, and they can stop business. Now, I would say to you that a little bit of perspective, I have 220 people in my IT department. I have an annual wage bill in that department of 22 million. They have a 15 million pound a year budget, and I had 12 people in cyber security. So I thought I had cracked it. I didn't. So you don't have to have all that. That's just the size of our business. But what you have to be is aware. And on the 23rd of December, I was actually going out for my wife's birthday. My CIO phoned me and said, "Boss, I think we've got a problem here." And what he was referring to was earlier in the day, our SIEM provider had picked up some issues where accounts were getting deleted, and they were getting deleted randomly. Now, we took the server offline, put it into quarantine, did a scan of the network, and thought, right, we've caught that. Then round about midnight, the fun started. Because these people had actually been in our system, and this is something that we've learned latterly, they've been in our system through a series of unintended events, and we'll maybe come back to that, and Mark, we can share that with you. But they got in, and they hid in our system, and they mapped the topography of our system and the access rights that people had. Now, it's pretty scary, so if you're not computer literate, it's a wee bit like somebody breaking into your house, hiding in the loft, and waiting until you go out, and then changing all the locks. That's really what they were trying to do. But the 23rd was a period where they thought that we wouldn't be aware. And it was just the fact that our SIEM provider picked up that we were aware. And we were able to try and mount some defense, because at midnight, what they did was put malware onto our system and started to encrypt our servers, and they tried to have a secure tunnel to our Romanian IP address. Now, we were trying to fight that, but you're fighting man against machine. So eventually we pulled the plug round about 2 o'clock in the morning, Christmas Eve, and I'm thinking, thank God, it's over. The fun was just beginning. It really was just beginning. Because inadvertently, what these people are criminals. They are trying to extort money from you. And if we hadn't pulled the plug, I'd have woken up to a blue screen saying, phone this number, you need to pay. But we didn't do that, but unplugging from the world actually did the same amount of damage. So on Christmas Eve, we phoned the police, And I would actually encourage anybody that has this happen to them. The police are actually very good. They are part of the National Cybercrime Agency, and they are joined. So if you ever find yourself in this position, and I hope you don't, because it's a very lonely place and you don't want to be there, but if you are, the first thing you should do is phone the police, which is what we did. And I'm thinking, right, okay, it's all over, all done, backups are fine, let's plug in, let's start again.
So Eddie, just to clarify, so where you said you unplugged, do you mean literally
Unplugged.
all your systems for all your businesses?
Unplugged.
Right, okay.
Because if I hadn't, I'd have lost them. So, and again, it was timed to do exactly that. You know, over Christmas, very few people about. We were one of hundreds of companies that were getting hit that day, but we managed to unplug and save our backups and save our data centers. So genuinely, the next day was a wee bit of a challenge. Trying to put a smiling face on Christmas Day is not great. Boxing Day, we sat down and decided what we're going to do. We had 700 people to pick up a car the next day. We had 2,500 people coming in for servicing, and we had 1,500 customers that were picking up rental cars. And we had no idea who they were, when they were coming in, no systems, couldn't speak to our staff, couldn't speak to our customers, had nothing. So it was a wee bit of panic to start with, but a wee bit of resilience. You know, a wee bit like COVID. You know, we all had to rebuild our business again, so we had the basic plan of what to do. So 10 days later, our systems were back to some semblance of order, but this is where I start to think, well, I have failover systems, I have mirrored systems, but I had no spare network. And our IR provider, or our incident response guys, were telling us, don't plug in. So we then had to build a system or a network from scratch. And Mark was very impressed that I now know what an active domain is, or an active directory and a domain controller. But genuinely, that's what controls the access to our system. So we had to build that from scratch. We then had to go through every one of our servers and see what had been affected, what hadn't been affected. There was only 5% or 10% of the servers that were actually affected, but we had 1,400 servers to check, and that's a lot of checking. So within 10 days, our team worked really hard. We got back up, and we were running about 20%. And then for the next 6 months, we have gradually been bringing back systems up until the end of July, where we're now fully operational again. And you know, it's the unintended consequences. You know, you have your staff to manage, your customers to manage, your system to rebuild. There's an awful lot of moving plates there. So quite happy to share how we do that later on if you want to.
Okay. So Mark, just your perspective on this kind of attack, who are the likely perpetrators of this, and where can businesses kind of expect this to come from?
So I think it's important to understand that the days of a hacker being a guy in a hoodie in his mother's basement are like well over. These are extremely well-funded, extremely well-run organizations, and it's their full-time job. They have sales targets, they have P&Ls, and they are spending their entire life thinking about ways in which to perpetrate attacks like this. And they're good at it. I would say that the organizations probably split down into four main categories by country, because a lot of these organizations are either state-funded or state-tolerated. So dealing with Russia first, evidence suggests that over 3/4 of all payments, ransomware attack payments, are paid to organizations within Russia. That and they're predominantly interested in generating revenue. So they're the kind of extortion end of this spectrum. Then you have organizations within China, and my favorite, Wicked Panda, otherwise known as APT41, are a particular group within China, and they're funded by the Communist Party of China, and they're part of a government aim, what's called China 2025, which is all about being self-sufficient in high tech by the end of the decade. And so what they're interested in is much more targeted attacks, so they're not interested in revenue, they've already got enough money. What they're interested in is stealing intellectual property, so they're interested in the plans for the next Jaguar Land Rover. They're interested in silicon designs, high-tech designs. Then you've got North Korea, which are basically interested in targeting the banking system and financial systems, because what they're looking for is hard currency. And lastly, we've got the Iranian National Guard that are sponsoring a lot of activity that's related to what's called asymmetric warfare. They can't fight a conventional war against the West. They don't have the resources, so they're using the internet to fight that war. And sadly, we've seen some of the evidence of that over the last few weeks. So those are the kind of organizations that you might see. As I say, it's a mistake to think that these are amateur organizations. And I guess, Eddie, that you kind of bear out that, that thesis that these are kind of pretty clued in organizations.
Oh yes, I mean, one of the things that, that our attack was Russian hackers. And state-sponsored, state-protected hacking group that perpetrated this. And you know, one of the things that they are a business. They were so busy that it took them 15 days to give me my second present, which was they'd managed to steal some of our data. So for 15 days, I'm thinking, I'm okay. There's no data's lost. Happy days. And then we start a negotiation. And that's one of the big learnings for me, is that some of our external advisors are saying, no, don't negotiate. You're negotiating with criminals. You are perpetrating the proceeds of crime, so don't negotiate. And then some people are saying, yeah, you do need to negotiate because you actually don't know what they took. So you need to buy yourself a little bit of time to find out what they took. And that process of negotiation was what we entered into. Now, we're dealing with a business. They actually have a frequently asked questions on their website, which is rather challenging and a wee bit annoying. And they will put you through to their finance department. So genuinely, I think at the end of the day, we were trying to find out what was taken, because one of the things is that they come in, they copy, they then take a RAR file and they delete the RAR file. So you actually don't know what they copied or where they took it to. So it's very unstructured data as well. So you're kind of stabbing in the dark. So there was a couple of things that we knew that were a potential risk, and we took the advice and we notified our customers. But the one thing I would say is that, you know, there is no right or wrong with negotiation. It depends on your own business. It depends where you are in a hack. It depends how far through you are. If you wake up to that blue screen and you can't do anything, you have no backup, you've got very little option. And nobody is actually going to hold that against you. But if you have an option, then again, that's what we took. I'm a tight Scotsman, I'm a motor dealer, so trying to get money out of me is like blood out of stone, and I'm dealing with Russians who don't understand that. So we couldn't quite come to a deal, and they released the data, but I was able to give a good guess, most of it, to what they may or may not have had. And where we are with it today.
And following that, I'm interested, Eddie, in what the kind of cost to the business and the disruption and the time and investment that you've had to put in since as well.
Some of the costs are intangible and immeasurable, really. People's time, effort. I've had people in my IT department sleeping on the floor over Christmas. They weren't going home. You can't measure that in terms of commitment, but it has had a substantial impact on our business. We were operating with no systems for the busiest quarter of the year in the motor trade, and we weren't doing any prospecting. So genuinely, that has impacted our profitability. As well as that, you then have to say, right, okay, how can I make myself better? How can we improve our defences? And we have spent a considerable amount of money putting belt, braces and buffers around everything. And that wasn't because, and I gave you a hint of some of the budgets that we actually spend, but we've now spent on top of that another £5 million just to try and protect ourselves. But as Mark and I were talking earlier, you don't have to spend that amount of money to protect yourself. You just basically have to do proper hygiene in terms of cyber. And that's it in a nutshell. It's like, it should all be proportionate to your business. It is a risk. You have to be on it all the time. These hackers only have to be lucky once. And that's one of the things that I would say to everybody, is that it is a risk. It is something that should be on your agenda. It is definitely on my agenda. But one of the things that we started with was our internet filters were so far up that you can even get BBC on our website. Our Mindcast emails, it was slowing the business down. So we went from super shut down to having to relax that a little bit, because we all have to make money. We all have to use digital systems to trade, to work, and it's just where you relax it to.
And I mean, from both of you, really, what you talk about hygiene factors. What are the essentials, really? What can businesses be looking at, and at least making sure that they're doing and their staff are doing to try to deliver the protection that you need?
So, I think the first thing, and hopefully we've made this point already, is that this is a business problem. I gave Tim a bit of a hard time saying this is part of the digital stream. I don't think this should be part of a digital stream. This is a business threat. You need to treat the people like they're competitors, because that's what they are. They're impacting your bottom line. I think the second thing in terms of what kind of follows on from that is that, assuming that people are going to get in, and they are, you can limit the ways in which they can get in, but inevitably, as Eddie says, they only have to get lucky once. I think it's important to have a really robust business continuity plan in place. So at what level does the ransomware attack have to be before you convene a board meeting? What's your appetite for payment? You have to think about the cost and the benefits. It's all very well saying we're not going to pay any money to criminals, but there's a certain cost at which you're cutting off your nose to spite your face if you do that. So you need to think all these things through in advance, because chances are at some point there's going to be an attack. I think the other thing to understand is that something like 82% of all ransomware attacks are the result of what's called insider threat. So if you haven't heard of insider threat, it's kind of fairly self-explanatory. It's the latest buzzword, really, in ransomware and security circles. And it says that the majority of attacks require some element of complicity from either negligent or malicious insiders. So that's people making mistakes or people deliberately placed in your organization or disaffected employees who then compromise your organization. And there was a lovely TV program about 6 months ago talking about a GCHQ hack, and somebody said, how on earth did they find out the password to GCHQ? Somebody else goes, it's obvious, somebody told them. Nobody ever thinks of the somebody told them answer. You know, it's easy to get in if gives you the key. And I think it's important to kind of bear that in mind. So there are ways you can think about insider threat. There's something called the principle of least privilege, which is all about managing what people within your organization have access to. So if they are compromised, they compromise as little as they possibly can. But there's some general housekeeping. But you need to keep doing these things. There's no silver bullet. I wish I could sell you a piece of software that could solve all these problems, but it doesn't exist. You need to keep doing the very basic things and keep doing them day after day, month after month, year after year. Because as I say, the perpetrators are not easing up. They're at this and on this all day, every day.
Do you think that larger businesses are the prime target for a lot of these, or do they actually see that the smaller ones are perhaps more vulnerable? They don't have the huge kind of extensive resources, IT department that something like Arnold Clark.
So I think, as I say, you need to think about these as commercial organizations. So of course they're going to go after larger organizations because the size of the prize is bigger. But they're also going to, you know, one of the things that makes motor dealerships more vulnerable is you've got a lot of financial data, but also you have, so I understand, reasonably high turnover, and that adds to the insider threat. But what I would also say is when the cost of trying to perpetrate an attack is just to send a bunch of emails, they're going to try everybody. You know, and actually, as Eddie was saying, last Christmas they got lucky. They exceeded their targets. Their sales guys exceeded their targets, and their customer service organization couldn't keep up. You know, and that's the terminology that we need to think about in these organizations. So I think everybody's at risk, large and small, because the barriers to scaling up, when I can send 10 million emails as easy as I can send 5, you know, why wouldn't I target everybody?
Eddie, talk to us about, in the recovery phase, how did you work with your suppliers and experts and Police Scotland to recover as quickly and as best you could?
So I think, Tim, you know, the timing of this attack was a benefit and also a hindrance. The benefit was that we were closed over the Christmas period. I just paid my wages pre-Christmas. I wouldn't have normally paid the wages till after Christmas, and I just paid all my big suppliers. So fortunately, the actual effects of that it could have been a lot worse. I could have had 12,000 people that weren't going to get their wages. You know, that would have been a problem. So the good thing about that was it gave us 4 days to try and put our house in order and at least start with an semblance of what we were going to do. The downside is the people that you need to help you are all on holiday. And you are dealing with, you know, God bless them, but lower down people in the organisation that can't make a decision. You know, they're not empowered to make a decision. They can't get hold of their boss, and you've just been hacked. So it's a wee bit like you've got a contagious disease and nobody wants to talk to you. But once you get over that, the actual help is there. Police Scotland is there. Cyber Centre is there, and there is specific agencies in Scotland and England that are there to help. And again, it's a lonely place to be. So my point, or one of the learnings that I have, if you haven't done this already, is I'm not an IT person. I'm a user of IT. I have no understanding of bits, bytes, seams, barriers, firewalls. I mean, I know what they are, but I wouldn't know if it hit me in the face. But the one thing I would say to you is you should have an external consultant, whether it's somebody that you trust, whether it's somebody from the public sector or whether it's somebody from police or whoever it is. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, at least have somebody that you can talk to, because you need somebody to be by your side to help you make those decisions. Making a decision is, you have to make decisions, you have to make them quickly. So our partners were great, the finance companies were great, and our customers were great.
Has this made you value the partnerships you have with certain technology providers even more so, I guess, the way that they've worked with you on some of this?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's a simple answer there, Tim, because the people that we've picked, the people that are there, they are continuing to help us today. A wee bit like what Mark just said, is that you're only as good as your weakest link. Your system can be 100% secure at 9 o'clock in the morning. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you could be wide open. And I'll give you an example. Yesterday, one of my members of staff clicked on an email phishing link and downloaded malware onto 500 machines. Happy days. Here we go. Let's go again. Christmas revisited. But it wasn't, because we now have the software in place to absolutely go and lock that down, take it offline. But that person didn't do anything malicious. And that's one of the things, that's one of the biggest weaknesses we've got. They didn't do anything malicious. They were busy, they had 10 emails to do, and he just clicked through them whilst trying to answer a phone call. That, to me, is the message you need to get out to your staff, is stop, take your time, and absolutely look at it. We send out phishing emails to our staff every month just to see who clicks on it. And you get it, you get people doing it, and it's 9 times out of 10, it is not malicious in any way, shape or form. They're busy, they're distracted, and they've actually just inadvertently clicked a link. So, some of the cyber things that we've learned is force password changes. Force password changes every month, and it can't be the same one with a couple of digits. Okay? Just can't. Don't do things like that. Force password changes, don't share passwords. If you share passwords, we take you offline and we make you go through hoops to get back online again. And it's all about a culture. You might take this seriously, but your staff also have to take it seriously. And that works both in their personal life and in their business life.
I guess a challenge.
I think there's just one thing I'd like to pick up on that Eddie said there, which is partnering with IT, and you kind of, Tim, you also asked the question. I think I worked in IT departments in large organizations, and quite often we've been seen as kind of a bit of a dark art, a bit of a back office, and a bit kind of second-class citizens. And I would say, those days need to be over. The days of people saying, oh, well, it's technology, I don't really understand that, I don't know what's going on. You can't, that's one of the weaknesses that can be exploited. And I think if you're not comfortable with your senior technology people, so that's your CIO, head of technology, your head of security, being at the top table in terms of the business, then you need to find people who are. You need to find, and I recognize that the IT industry has not done ourselves any favors at all in terms of being accessible and trying to understand business. But the business and technology and suppliers need to partner, because otherwise, you make yourself overly vulnerable.
Just quickly, Mark. Culturally, how can businesses make sure that every one of their staff fully appreciates their role in protecting the business from this? Because I think a lot of people, a bit like Eddie was saying earlier, people will just through being busy or naivety accidentally click things, maybe they don't fully appreciate the threat.
So, absolute story of my life. You know, people go because human beings don't understand asymmetric threats. So there's a chance that, you know, if there's a small chance of a high impact action happening, nobody really takes that seriously. You know, this email that I'm clicking on could bankrupt the entire organization, but that's not very likely. So we don't understand, though, we're not able as human beings to process that. So I think you just need to reinforce things. I mean, working from home has made that worse, by the way. There's evidence to suggest that people are 50% more likely to use insecure practices when they're working from home than they are in the offices. And that scares the hell out of me. Most people think that they are able to protect themselves from a cyber attack, that they would be able to spot that email. By the way, I've spent my life in this industry. I'm not one of those people. If I was the target, a personal target of a cyber attack, I wouldn't know what to do, right? Because that's the nature of human psychology. So, Tim, you asked the question, what can you do? I think you need to raise awareness. You need to make it very clear that in audit speak, people talk about the tone from the top. You know, people like Eddie need to commit, as he has done today, needs to commit to saying this is important, this is an important part of our business, it's not an annoying admin task, it's not about compliance, it's about staying in business and being here, you know, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the track. You can tell I believe this like quite passionately.
That's a great note to end. Sorry, before we end, anything from you, Eddie, before we end?
One of the things I would say is that, you know, just picking up on Mark's point there, is that it's every day. Every day you have to do this, and every day you have to repeat it. Now, I've maybe got a head start on most of you because we've lived through that, and my staff feel the pain and have felt the pain of having no systems, having no access to internet, etc. So they are a wee bit more cautious than they perhaps were pre-December. But making it real for them. You know, I give a message to them every month, and it's just, don't click a link. It's nice and simple, don't click a link. If in doubt, send it off to our IT department. Just don't click a link. So that's the first thing. And also relating to these people that actually, if this attack had happened to us a week later, nobody would have get paid. Now that absolutely scares the living hell out of my staff, and they, you know, so just as Mark said, is that wealthy company, it's not, me clicking that link's not going to bankrupt the company, but I might not get paid, so I won't bother. And genuinely, that is all about, you just have that message going all the time, and it's not as Mark said, it's not a silver bullet. It is just every day you keep going. I mean, there are some real personal learnings for me, and you know, I may share that one day, but I've certainly added a new chapter to my CV that I didn't really want in December.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Everyone, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up there, but please show our appreciation to Eddie Hawthorne and Mark Rodbert. Really insightful discussion. Thanks, Eddie.